Graham Mercer had spent years uncovering the secrets of Hollywood's biggest stars, but nothing had ever led him to something as strange as what he was now facing. His investigations had always been grounded in reality, scandals, hidden affairs, embezzlement, but the mystery surrounding Angelina Jolie felt different. It had started with whispers, rumors that didn't quite make sense, and now, as he sat in his dimly lit office staring at an unmarked folder full of missing pieces, he realized he was on the verge of something that defied logic. Graham had been following Angelina Jolie's career for years. She had a way of disappearing from the public eye, long gaps in her schedule where no one, not even close associates, could explain where she had been. Most chalked it up to personal time, humanitarian, trips or secret film projects, but Graham had seen patterns before, and this wasn't normal. Angelina Jolie wasn't just private. She was absent in ways that left no digital trace. No leaked photos, no sightings, nothing. It was as if she had stepped off the earth entirely. Determined to find an answer, Graham had started retracing Angelina Jolie's steps, looking into her flight records, her known locations, anything that might give him insight into where she had been going during her unexplained disappearances. But every lead had turned into a dead end. Private jets with no official destinations, hotels booked under names that didn't exist, locations where Angelina Jolie was supposed to be staying but where no one had actually seen her. The more he searched, the stranger the puzzle became. Then came the footage, grainy, pulled from a security camera near a private airfield. Graham had been given the video by an anonymous source, someone who claimed to have worked at an airport, where Angelina Jolie had boarded a flight that shouldn't have existed. In the video, Angelina Jolie could be seen walking toward a small, unmarked aircraft. She looked different, not in appearance, but in demeanor. She wasn't acting like a celebrity trying to avoid the press. She was moving with purpose, with urgency, as if she knew something no one else did. Graham watched as Angelina Jolie disappeared into the plane, the door shutting behind her. A few minutes later, the aircraft lifted off the ground. There were no flight logs, no official records of that plane ever arriving anywhere. Angelina Jolie had taken off into the sky and simply vanished. That was the moment Graham knew he was dealing with something bigger than a missing celebrity. Angelina Jolie wasn't just hiding. She was going somewhere that no one could track. Desperate for more answers, Graham started reaching out to people who had worked closely with Angelina Jolie. A former personal assistant, a hairstylist, even a security guard who had once been part of her private detail. Most refused to talk. Some avoided his calls entirely. But there was one man, a driver who had occasionally worked for her, who finally agreed to meet. The driver told Graham about the odd nights he had picked up Angelina Jolie, always under strict instructions to avoid main roads, to take her to secluded locations where no paparazzi could follow. He had been paid well, but something about the secrecy had always unsettled him. There was one night in particular that stood out. He had driven Angelina Jolie to an abandoned airstrip outside the city. She had stepped out of the car wearing a long cloak, something regal and strange, nothing like her usual Hollywood attire. She had told him to leave immediately, to forget the trip had ever happened, and then, just like in the footage Graham had seen, she had boarded a mysterious aircraft and disappeared into the night. Graham's mind raced as he processed what the driver had told him. Why was Angelina Jolie sneaking away to places no one knew existed? And why was she dressing like someone out of another time, another world? His next breakthrough came unexpectedly. While digging through archived emails leaked from a major Hollywood studio, Graham came across something bizarre, an old message from a film director who had worked with Angelina Jolie years ago. The email described an unusual event that had happened on set, something the director had never been able to explain. One day, during a break in filming, Angelina Jolie had walked off set for what was supposed to be a short rest, but when she returned, she had changed. The director had written about how her posture was different, how she had spoken in a tone that felt off, as if she were struggling to remember how to behave like herself. Even stranger, the lighting crew had noticed that her shadow had looked wrong, elongated, stretching in directions that defied the natural position of the sun. When they had questioned her, Angelina Jolie had simply smiled and told them everything was fine. Graham's hands trembled slightly as he read the email again. He had spent years exposing lies, but this wasn't just another Hollywood cover-up. This was something that didn't belong in reality. Pushing forward, Graham analyzed every strange event surrounding Angelina Jolie, looking for patterns. He found whispers of encounters where people had seen her speaking in a language no one recognized. Others described brief moments where she seemed almost out of place, as if she had forgotten how to exist in this world. The deeper he went, the more impossible the truth seemed. And then he found the final, undeniable proof, a journal. It had been mailed to him in an unmarked package, the pages filled with Angelina Jolie's handwriting. But this wasn't a diary of a Hollywood actress. It was a war record. The entries described battles fought in a place called Eldoria, a kingdom ruled by an ancient prophecy. Angelina Jolie had written of swords and shields, of alliances formed with powerful warriors, of a throne that she had once sat upon. She had described a war between realms, a war that had been raging for centuries. She wasn't just a visitor to this world, she was its queen. Graham's breath came slow and unsteady as he turned the final page. Angelina Jolie's last entry was written as if she had known someone would find it. The war is not over. I must return before it's too late. Graham closed the journal, his mind spinning. He had set out to investigate a missing actress, but instead, he had uncovered something that shattered his understanding of reality. Angelina Jolie was not just a celebrity, she was something else entirely. And wherever she had gone, she had no intention of staying hidden forever. As he sat in the dim light of his office, staring at the journal, Graham realized he had a choice. He could expose Angelina Jolie's secret, reveal to the world what he had found, or he could follow the trail, find out for himself where she had gone. And as he stared at the last words she had written, he knew there was only one way to get the answers he needed. He had to find Angelina Jolie before it was too late. Graham Mercer sat in his car, gripping the leather steering wheel, staring at the old airstrip where Angelina Jolie had last been seen. The night was silent, the only sound the distant hum of the wind cutting through the abandoned field. He had followed the trail for weeks, gathering every clue that pointed to something impossible. Angelina Jolie wasn't just vanishing from Hollywood. She was stepping into another world. The journal he had found, written in Angelina Jolie's own handwriting, described a realm beyond this one, a kingdom called Eldoria, where war raged and where she was not just an actress, but a queen. Every rational part of his mind screamed that this was fantasy, that it was a game or an elaborate deception. But the evidence, the flight records that disappeared, the surveillance footage of Angelina Jolie boarding an unregistered aircraft, the eyewitnesses who had seen her change, told a different story. Graham knew that if he wanted to understand where Angelina Jolie had gone, he had to go to the last place she had been seen. The airstrip had been shut down for years, left abandoned with no scheduled flights, yet multiple sources had confirmed that Angelina Jolie had been here on nights when she was supposedly elsewhere. He stepped out of his car, the gravel crunching. Beneath his feet, the cold air wrapping around him as he moved toward the center of the airfield. There were no lights, no markings, nothing to indicate that anything unusual had happened here. But Graham had learned to trust his instincts. Angelina Jolie had been here for a reason. He pulled the journal from his coat pocket, flipping through the pages, scanning the final entries she had written before disappearing. The war is not over. I must return before it's too late. Graham let the words sink in. If Angelina Jolie had written this, it meant she had expected to come back. But come back from where? And how? He turned the page, and for the first time, he noticed something strange, a hand-drawn symbol at the bottom, something that looked like an ancient crest. A circular emblem with intricate lines weaving together like a keyhole. He looked up, scanning the dark field, searching for anything that resembled the symbol in the journal. If Angelina Jolie had left this behind, it meant she had meant for someone to find it. His breath quickened as he moved across the field, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, until he saw something carved into the ground, the same symbol, from the journal, etched into the earth. Graham's pulse pounded. He knelt down, brushing his fingers over the markings, feeling the ridges beneath his skin. This wasn't just a coincidence. Angelina Jolie had left a trail. A sudden gust of wind howled through the airstrip, stronger than before, unnatural in its force. Graham stepped back as the symbol beneath him began to glow faintly, a deep blue light pulsing from the ground. He stumbled, his heart racing, his mind screaming that this was impossible. But the glow only intensified, swirling, stretching, forming something that should not exist, a doorway. Graham watched, frozen, as the air within the circle shimmered, distorting like rippling water. He could see something beyond it, something that was not this world, a landscape of towering castles, silver rivers, and distant battle cries. Angelina Jolie's journal had not been a fantasy. It had been a record of something real. The portal flickered, unstable, as if it were waiting. Graham knew that if Angelina Jolie had used this to cross over, she might still be there. He had spent weeks chasing her, uncovering her secrets, learning the impossible truth. Angelina Jolie wasn't just escaping Hollywood. She was returning to where she truly belonged. His mind raced with everything that could go wrong, every logical reason why stepping through would be a mistake. But then he thought of Angelina Jolie's words. The war is not over. If she was in danger, if she was fighting something beyond imagination, then he was the only one who knew the truth. He couldn't walk away now. He took a deep breath, steadied his heartbeat, and stepped forward. The air around him twisted as he passed through, his vision blurring, his body weightless. He felt as if he was being pulled through time, through existence itself, and then the world around him changed. Graham staggered forward onto solid ground, blinking against the golden sunlight. The air was different, crisper, richer, charged with something alive. He turned, expecting to see the portal still open behind him, but it was gone. He was in Eldoria now, the world Angelina Jolie had written about. The kingdom stretched before him, a breathtaking land of towering castles, rolling fields, and the distant glint of armored warriors preparing for battle. The sky above was filled with banners of gold and crimson, fluttering in the wind, and as he turned, he saw them, a vast army waiting at the gates of a fortress. And standing at the front, leading them, was Angelina Jolie. She was dressed in armor, unlike anything he had ever seen her wear before. It was regal, made of dark silver with golden etchings, a long cloak flowing behind her. Her sword rested at her side, her presence commanding, her expression unreadable. This was not the Angelina Jolie the world knew. This was a queen, a warrior, a leader preparing for war. Graham barely had time to take in the sight before she turned toward him, her piercing gaze locking onto his. She had expected him. She had known someone would come. Angelina Jolie stepped forward, her voice calm but firm, filled with the weight of someone who had seen more than any human should. She told him that he had made a mistake coming here, that Eldoria was on the brink of destruction, and now that he had entered this world, there was no going back. Graham tried to speak, tried to ask her what this all meant, but before he could, the sound of horns echoed across the valley. Angelina Jolie turned sharply, gripping her sword, her focus shifting toward the approaching enemy. The war she had written about was real, and now Graham was standing in the middle of it. Graham Mercer stood frozen at the edge of the battlefield, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Angelina Jolie stood before him, clad in dark silver armor, her sword resting at her side, her posture unshaken. The woman he had spent weeks tracking, the Hollywood icon who had vanished without explanation, was no longer just an actress or a public figure. She was something more. She was a warrior queen, and she was about to go to war. The army behind Angelina Jolie stretched across the horizon, their banners catching the wind, their armor glinting beneath the golden sun. The fortress behind her loomed tall, its stone walls lined with archers, ready to defend the kingdom she had sworn to protect. Graham felt as if he had stepped into the pages of a legend, a world that should not exist, but one that Angelina Jolie had ruled over for years. Graham tried to understand what was happening, but his thoughts were interrupted by the sound of distant war drums. The enemy forces moved in the distance, marching in formation, their dark banners unfurling like shadows creeping across the land. Angelina Jolie remained still, watching them from the front lines, her fingers tightening around the hilt of her sword. She was not afraid, she had done this before. The weight of the situation pressed down on Graham as he realized that Angelina Jolie had not just left Hollywood behind. She had returned to a battle she had been fighting long before anyone in his world had ever heard her name. The entries in her journal, the warnings she had written, the urgency in her final message, it had all been leading to this moment. Angelina Jolie had never truly belonged to Earth. She had been called back to this world, to Eldoria, to fight for a kingdom that depended on her. Graham stepped forward, his voice unsteady as he asked her how this was possible, how any of this could be real. Angelina Jolie did not turn to face him at first. She remained fixed on the approaching enemy, calculating, waiting. Then, slowly, she glanced at him over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. She told him that he had crossed into a world where stories were no longer just stories, where wars were not fought for power, but for survival. Angelina Jolie explained that she had been born into this destiny, chosen long before she had ever stepped foot into Hollywood. Graham felt his pulse quicken as Angelina Jolie raised her hand, signaling to her troops. The archers on the walls drew their bows, the cavalry shifted in formation, the warriors in the front lines braced for the coming fight. She had no time for explanations, no time for doubts. The enemy was here, and Angelina Jolie was ready to lead them into battle. A horn sounded from the enemy's ranks, a deep guttural blast that shook the air. Angelina Jolie stepped forward, her sword now fully drawn, her eyes locked on the battlefield ahead. The enemy forces began their charge, dark-armored warriors storming toward them, their weapons raised. Graham could only watch as Angelina Jolie, without hesitation, surged forward, leading her army into the fray. The battle erupted in an instant, the sound of metal clashing against metal filling the air. Angelina Jolie moved like a force of nature, her blade cutting through enemy ranks, her movements precise and relentless. She was not acting, not performing. This was real. She fought with the skill of someone who had spent lifetimes on the battlefield. Every strike executed with the power of a queen defending her people. Graham tried to keep up, his mind racing as he followed Angelina Jolie into the chaos. Arrows flew overhead, shields clashed, the ground trembled beneath the weight of warriors locked in combat. He had spent his life exposing lies, uncovering the hidden truths of the world, but nothing had ever prepared him for this. Angelina Jolie was not just a celebrity who had stumbled into another life. She had been forged for this, shaped by a war that had raged long before he had ever heard her name. As the battle raged on, Graham caught glimpses of Angelina Jolie in the midst of the fight, her presence unwavering. She fought not for glory, not for recognition, but for something greater, something that had been written in prophecy, something that she had carried within her since the day she had first crossed into this world. Graham saw Angelina Jolie turn toward him briefly, her eyes locking onto his as if silently telling him to stay back, to stay safe. But he couldn't just stand by and watch. He grabbed a fallen sword, its weight unfamiliar in his hands, and moved toward her. He had followed Angelina Jolie into this world seeking the truth, but now, standing on the battlefield beside her, he realized that the truth was not something to be reported. It was something to be fought for. The battle stretched on, the enemy forces relentless, but Angelina Jolie never faltered. She led her warriors with the confidence of a queen who had fought 100 battles before, her voice rising over the clamor, rallying her troops forward. Graham could see the respect in the eyes of her soldiers, the unwavering loyalty they had for her. Angelina Jolie was not just their leader, she was their hope. As the enemy lines began to weaken, Angelina Jolie raised her sword high, signaling the final push. Her forces surged forward, driving the enemy back, their momentum unstoppable. Graham watched as Angelina Jolie broke through the last of their defenses, her sword striking the enemy commander down, sealing the fate of the battle. The moment the enemy forces collapsed, silence swept over the battlefield. Angelina Jolie stood at the center, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths, her armor stained with battle. She turned, scanning the field, ensuring that her warriors had secured victory. Graham saw the exhaustion in her eyes, but also the quiet satisfaction of a queen who had once again defended her kingdom. Graham stepped closer, still trying to grasp everything that had just happened. Angelina Jolie met his gaze, and for the first time since he had arrived, he saw something in her expression that was not just determination, not just power, but relief. She had won, but she knew this was not the end. Angelina Jolie sheathed her sword, turning toward the fortress as her soldiers cheered behind her. The war was far from over. This was just another battle in a fight that had no clear end. She had returned to Eldoria knowing what awaited her, knowing that she would have to fight for as long as it took. Graham followed as Angelina Jolie led her army back toward the castle, the weight of the battle settling over him. He had come looking for answers, and now he had more than he could ever have imagined. Angelina Jolie was not just a warrior queen, she was a legend, and now he was a part of it. As the gates of the fortress closed behind them, Graham knew that he could never go back to his old life. He had crossed into Angelina Jolie's world, and there was no escaping it now. Graham Mercer walked behind Angelina Jolie, his boots pressing into the blood-soaked ground of the battlefield, as the victorious army made its way back to the fortress. The air was thick with the scent of war, iron, smoke, and the remnants of magic that had burned through the sky only hours before. He had witnessed the impossible, had seen Angelina Jolie lead her forces with a strength that no director or script had ever captured. She was not acting, not pretending. She was a queen, a warrior, and a force that belonged to this world more than she had ever belonged to Earth. The soldiers who followed Angelina Jolie moved with reverence, their eyes filled with devotion. They had seen her in battle, had watched her strike down the enemy with a precision that only a ruler forged in war could possess. Graham could feel the weight of their gazes on him as well. He was an outsider, a man from another world who had stumbled into their legend, but Angelina Jolie had allowed him to stand beside her, and that meant they would not question him, at least for now. As they reached the towering gates of the fortress, Angelina Jolie raised a hand, commanding the doors to open. The creaking of iron echoed into the night, and within moments the army was pouring back into the safety of their stronghold. Graham stepped through, his eyes scanning the grand city beyond the walls. This was Eldoria, the kingdom that Angelina Jolie had fought for, the land she had ruled long before Hollywood had claimed her. Inside, the people lined the streets, their faces filled with both relief and awe. They had been waiting for their queen, waiting for Angelina Jolie to return. Some knelt as she passed, others reached out as if needing to reassure themselves that she was truly there. Graham saw the way Angelina Jolie carried herself, her expression unwavering, her posture regal. She had been away from this world for too long, but now that she had returned, she was stepping back into her role without hesitation. The palace stood at the heart of the city, a towering structure of white stone and golden banners. As Angelina Jolie led them inside, the great hall erupted in movement. Advisors, generals, and warriors all gathered, their voices low but urgent. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Graham watched as Angelina Jolie removed her cloak, revealing the bruises and shallow cuts beneath her armor. She had fought harder than anyone, had thrown herself into the heart of the battle without a second thought, But she did not falter, did not show pain. She had no time for weakness. Graham knew that Angelina Jolie had been living two lives, one as a queen, one as an actress. But now that he had seen the truth, he understood that Hollywood had only ever been a mask. This was who she truly was. The woman he had once seen on red carpets and magazine covers was nothing compared to the ruler standing before him now. A council meeting was called, and Angelina Jolie took her place at the head of a grand table, surrounded by warriors who had followed her for years. Maps were laid out before her, detailing the movements of the enemy, the territories still under threat. Graham stood back, watching as Angelina Jolie listened, absorbing every detail, her mind calculating the next steps. She had spent years away, but nothing had faded from her memory. She was still the queen of Eldoria, and she would not let her. People fall. Graham felt a strange sense of awe as he watched Angelina Jolie command the room. Every decision she made, every strategy she approved, shaped the fate of an entire world. He realized then that she had never truly left. Even when she had been in Hollywood, even when cameras had flashed around her, her mind had always been here in Eldoria, preparing for the moment she would return. As the meeting ended, Angelina Jolie finally turned to Graham, her gaze unreadable. She led him to a quiet chamber, away from the ears of her advisors. The firelight flickered against the stone walls as she stood before him, removing the last pieces of her armor, revealing the exhaustion hidden beneath her strong exterior. Graham could see the weight of responsibility pressing down on Angelina Jolie, the burden of being both a ruler and a warrior. She told him that she had never meant for him to follow her, that he had crossed into something far bigger than he could comprehend. But Graham shook his head. He had seen too much, had uncovered too many pieces of the truth to walk away now. He told Angelina Jolie that the world he came from would never understand what she was, that they would never accept the truth. For the first time since he had arrived, Angelina Jolie let out a quiet breath, something between a sigh and a laugh. She told him that she had always known this. That was why she had hidden her true self for so long, why she had lived in both worlds but never fully belonged to either. She had spent years pretending to be someone else, someone that the world would accept. But here, in Eldoria, there was no need for pretense. Here, she could be exactly who she was meant to be. Graham asked Angelina Jolie if she would ever return to Earth, if she would ever walk the red carpets again, sit for interviews, live the life she had built there. Angelina Jolie hesitated, her eyes distant as if considering a future that now felt like a dream. She told him that Eldoria needed her now, that there was still so much left to fight for. She did not know if she could ever go back. A knock at the door interrupted them. A messenger entered, urgency in his expression. Angelina Jolie straightened immediately, her exhaustion vanishing in an instant. Another battle was coming. The enemy had regrouped, and they would not wait. Angelina Jolie turned to Graham one last time, a silent understanding passing between them. She had no choice. She had to fight. Graham watched as Angelina Jolie stepped back into the light of the hallway, her presence once again commanding. She was not just an actress, not just a woman who had played warriors in films. She was a legend, a ruler, a force of nature. As she walked toward her waiting army, her sword at her side, Graham knew that he had been given a glimpse of something that no one on earth would ever believe. He had come searching for the truth about Angelina Jolie, and now he had found it. She was not just a queen, she was a warrior, and she was never going to stop fighting. As the gates of the fortress opened once more and Angelina Jolie led her army into the night, Graham knew that his life had changed forever. He had stepped into a world where myths were real, where history was written in blood and battle, where one woman held the fate of a kingdom in her hands. And Angelina Jolie, Hollywood's untouchable star, the actress the world had worshipped, had never belonged to Earth at all.